April 1945. Berlin was no longer a capital city. It was a graveyard of concrete, smoke, and shattered dreams. Soviet artillery thundered from the east. American forces pushed from the west. The Third Reich was collapsing. Deep beneath the ruins of the Reich Chancellery, inside a reinforced concrete bunker, Adolf Hitler waited. Or did he? Because according to some historians, there may have been a plan for escape. By late April 1945, Germany had already lost the war. The Allies had crossed the Rhine. The Red Army had surrounded Berlin. Food supplies were nearly gone. Communication lines were broken. The Luftwaffe barely existed. Hitler had retreated underground to the Führerbunker on January 16, 1945. The bunker was not glamorous. It was claustrophobic, poorly ventilated, constantly shaking from bombardment. Yet from this underground tomb, he continued issuing impossible military orders. Official history tells us, on April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker. His body was burned outside the Reich Chancellery. But here's where things get complicated. Soviet troops discovered the remains, but immediately classified the findings. Joseph Stalin himself fueled confusion. At the Potsdam Conference in July 1945, Stalin reportedly hinted that Hitler might have escaped. Why would Stalin say that? Was it psychological warfare? Was it political manipulation? Or was there genuine uncertainty? This is where the escape narrative begins. Several theories claim there were potential escape paths. One involved a breakout by air. Despite Berlin being surrounded, small aircraft had landed in the city during late April. Hannah Reich, a German test pilot, successfully flew into Berlin on April 26. If she could land, could someone else take off? Another theory suggests underground tunnels connecting to Tempelhof Airport. However, historical evidence shows that by April 30th, Soviet forces had nearly sealed all major routes. Escape would have required near impossible timing. The most famous escape theory claims Hitler fled to Argentina. After the war, several Nazi officials did escape to South America. Adolf Eichmann, Josef Mengele. Both found refuge in Argentina for years, so the question naturally arose, if they could escape, why not Hitler? In 2017, CIA documents declassified old investigations into claims that Hitler was alive in South America. But these files mostly contained unverified reports. No conclusive evidence, just rumors. In 1945, Soviet forces recovered dental remains believed to be Hitler's. His dental assistant later identified them. In 2018, French forensic scientists examined fragments of skull and teeth preserved in Russian archives. Their conclusion: the dental evidence matched Hitler's records. No evidence of escape. No alternative identity. Scientific analysis strongly supported suicide in Berlin. So if the evidence supports suicide, why does the escape story persist? Because uncertainty breeds myth. The Soviets kept information secret for years. Cold War propaganda amplified confusion, and people are drawn to mystery. A dictator vanishing into the shadows is more cinematic than a suicide in a bunker. Witness accounts from those inside the bunker describe the final hours. Hitler married Eva Braun on April 29th. He dictated his political testament. On April 30th, sometime after 3 p.m., gunshots were heard. His staff carried the bodies outside and burned them. Soviet artillery continued to fall. Berlin fell days later. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. Inside the bunker, the atmosphere was no longer political. It was psychological. Martin Bormann, Joseph Goebbels, General Krebs, secretaries, guards. They were not planning victory anymore. They were planning survival. Some begged Hitler to attempt a breakout. Others believed surrender was the only option. But Hitler refused both. Witnesses later testified that he had accepted defeat. He spoke of betrayal, of generals who had failed him, of a German people who did not prove worthy. This was not the mindset of a man preparing for escape. This was the mindset of a man preparing for finality. In his final political testament, Hitler did not outline an escape route. He appointed successors: Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz as president, Joseph Goebbels as chancellor. He blamed the war on international forces, but there was no coded message, no hidden instructions to regroup, no plan to rebuild from exile. History shows something very important here. Leaders who plan escape usually secure loyal military units. Hitler had none left. Berlin was collapsing block by block. When Soviet troops reached the Chancellery garden, they found partially burned remains. The bodies were charred. Identification was difficult. This is where confusion intensified. The Soviets secretly moved the remains. They conducted autopsies behind closed doors. And then, they said very little publicly. In the chaos of war's end, silence creates speculation, and speculation becomes legend. Joseph Stalin was not naive. By allowing rumors of Hitler's survival, he created strategic uncertainty. If the West believed Hitler might be alive, it justified continued military vigilance. It justified intelligence operations. It kept a political tension alive. In a world entering the Cold War, mystery was useful. After the war, Argentina became a refuge for fleeing Nazis, but none were comparable to Hitler's profile. Moving a man as recognizable as Hitler across continents, through Allied-controlled oceans, under constant surveillance, would have required a global conspiracy of massive scale. No credible documentation supports such coordination. Historians have searched for decades. No proof has emerged. In 2018, forensic experts examined preserved dental remains in Moscow archives. The teeth matched dental records from Hitler's personal dentist. Cyanide traces were detected. Gunshot trauma was consistent with witness reports. Scientific methodology replaced wartime rumor. And science does not support the escape theory. But facts alone do not erase myth. Why? Because dramatic endings fascinate us. A dictator vanishing into the shadows feels cinematic. It feels unfinished. Human psychology resists simple conclusions, especially when evil seems too large to end quietly. Eyewitness testimony from bunker staff aligns closely. April 29th, marriage to Eva Braun. April 30th, final meal. Mid-afternoon, private farewell. Gunshot heard. Bodies carried upstairs. Petrol poured. Flames ignited under artillery fire. The Soviet advance did not pause. Berlin continued to burn. There was no secret convoy, no hidden aircraft, no midnight submarine. Only collapse. On May 2nd, Berlin officially surrendered. On May 8th, 1945, Germany signed unconditional surrender. The war in Europe ended. The regime did not continue underground. It did not reappear abroad. It dissolved. History moved forward. So, did Hitler almost escape? There may have been early contingency thoughts. There may have been theoretical routes months earlier. But by April 1945, Berlin was encircled. Airfields were unusable. Command structures were shattered. The evidence, eyewitness, forensic, and historical, points in one direction. The Third Reich ended underground. Not in exile, not in Argentina, but beneath the ruins of Berlin. History is not built on rumors. It is built on documentation. Yet myths survive because uncertainty leaves space for imagination. In the final days of April 1945, the world watched a regime collapse. What remains today is not mystery, but a reminder of how fragile power truly is. If you found this documentary valuable, consider subscribing for more untold stories from history, because sometimes the truth is more powerful than the legend.